Jaya Shriman Narayana. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Dharma Rashtra Jayate. Om Hari Om. Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the live stream of the International Sanatana Dharma Society. This is our first broadcast of 2022. And for those of you who heard my previous live stream where I talked about 2022 and how this is going to be a truly wonderful, wonderful year, especially in comparison to last year, which was not a wonderful year for so many people, very sadly, for our entire world. So many terrible things going on that we can't even talk about, but so many terrible, terrible things that were happening to innocent human beings throughout the length and breadth of the entire world in 2021. But 2022 is going to be a wonderful year. Ultimately, it will be a wonderful year. Whether it starts off that way or not, that's difficult to say. Things may, again, continue to get a little bit worse for a little while longer. But ultimately, 2022 is going to be a truly wonderful year. It's going to be a year of hope, of positivity, of continued growth, of goodness, of dharma throughout the length and breadth, again, of the world. And I am hoping that for each one of you as individuals, as individual persons, it will also be a wonderful year of growth for yourself as well. And that, despite anything else that may be happening in the external world. Again, whether craziness is continuing to happen for a little while longer, whether things turn around very quickly, any combination or whatever indeed happens externally. I hope that for you as a person, you will redouble your commitment to dharma, your commitment to sadhana, to doing the actual spiritual practices necessary in order to grow as a person spiritually and truthfully in every way. And I truly hope that this will be a blessed year for you as a person. So again, thank you so much for being here. Before we begin, before we jump into what will be the talk for today, and then afterwards questions and answers, first, let me just remind people, please do not ask your questions as I'm giving my talk. I will not see them, guaranteed. Rather, please wait until I tell you that indeed my talk is over, and then it is the time to ask questions, and then I will do my best to answer as many questions as possible. But a few other things I want to say. First of all, please like this video if you can. Please subscribe to our channel if you have not done so already. Please comment in the comment section, especially once this video is available as a recording, because that all helps with the algorithms, and thus our video will hopefully be suggested to other people who can see and then hear this wonderful, very positive message about Vedic spirituality. The other thing is, please visit dharmacentral.com. This is our main website. And there is so much that is there. You can join our email list, which I encourage you to do if you haven't done so already. You can see our books that are available and purchase one or all of those. We have approximately 10, 11, 12 different books that the ISDS puts out, and many, many, many more coming. We have a beautiful mantra CD, an album called Mantra Meditations that you'll see available there. Please consider becoming a member, a monthly tithing member of the International Sanatana Dharma Society also if you can. That is the movement that is presenting this live stream to you right now. And etc. Please help us to help you. Please help us to help the world in every way. Please spread the link to this and truthfully every single video that we have on all of your social media, etc. And with that, let us now dive into the talk for today. The talk for today is called Worshipping God in the Kali Yuga. And this is indeed what I'm going to be speaking about. And I'm going to be doing so by, as I usually do, as I very often do, looking at a verse from the Vedic scriptures themselves. And this verse very specifically is a very beautiful verse. And if you look in the description of this video, you will see the actual verse written out there. And I translated this verse myself. I actually did this over the weekend. And I made sure to especially be absolutely meticulous in translating this verse. I took my time and I translated this verse word by word by word. I looked at the grammatical structure. I looked at each individual word and what is the exact translation of these words, how the sentences should come together perfectly in keeping with the original in Sanskrit, etc., etc. So again, this is my translation, no one else's translation. And this is the translation of this verse. And specifically, it is Srimad Bhagavatam, and it is Canto 11, Chapter 5, Verse 32. And again, a beautiful verse that speaks about precisely what is the topic of this live stream today, of this talk that I'm about to give. And that is worshiping God in the Kali Yuga. Before I dive in, let me just say this. This verse is really looking at two aspects of what is meant by that title. First of all, it is looking at worshiping God. Well, what does that mean? Well, the first thing that this verse is doing is explaining precisely what is the nature of God. Who is this God who we are to worship? That is the truly highest being. Who is this God? Is it this person, this goddess, that God, this triune, this, that, etc., etc.? Of all the plethora of seeming choices that we have, of course, we have no choice. God is God. We don't choose who God is, just like no one chooses who we are. But with all these seeming choices that we have, one of the things that is done with this verse is to precisely determine conclusively who is being worshipped. Who is God? Who is this God to be indeed worshipped in the Kali Yuga? Number one. And then number two, how to do so. How is it that in this age, very specifically, we are to worship God? Thus, this is a verse that deals, philosophically speaking, as far as, let's say, a philosophical, categorical, exegetical analysis of this verse. It's dealing with two things. A, divine ontology, i.e., what is the nature of God? And B, sadhana, or practice. Practice. What is that praxis? What is that practice by which we know that highest God? So that's what this verse is dealing with very specifically. So that being said, let us now dive into my translation of this verse, which is again, Canto 11, Chapter 5, Verse 32 of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And with that, the verse proceeds thusly. It is certainly the case that in this age of Kali, wise men worship through sacrificial rituals predominantly consisting of reciting the names of the Lord and singing praises to him. The Lord, who is of dark blue color, though he is bright in luster, who is accompanied by his associates, flawless in all of his limbs, equipped with his weapons, and served by his attendants. So thus is the verse, Canto 11, Chapter 5, Verse 32. So, having read the verse very quickly, now let's go through it. And we will take our time with this verse, and we'll do this as I usually do, one small section at a time. It is certainly the case that in this age of Kali, that's where we'll stop for now, and I will comment on that. First of all, again, as is clear from this verse is talking about very specifically in the Kali Yuga, how is it that we are indeed to worship God? What is the process very specifically for the denizens of this dark age? The Kali Yuga is the age that we're living in. And this is an age which is the last of 4 ages. And with each proceeding age, the age gets worse qualitatively, and especially as far as the human beings who are inhabiting that specific time period. The age gets worse and worse and worse. Well, we are now very specifically living within the Kali Yuga, and this is the very worst of ages. That being the case, it's understood by both the Srimad Bhagavatam, by really all the Vedic scriptures, but also by the rishis who indeed revealed all of these Vedic scriptures. It's understood that there are very unique circumstances in this age that are not found in other ages. In other ages, human beings were much more qualitatively advanced than they are now. You see, the idea of qualitative progressive evolution is a lie and a superstitious myth. All the ancients, and when I say all the ancients, I mean all the ancients, not just Vedic, but all of ancient Europe, ancient China, all of Asia, etc., 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 all held to the logical, intelligent view that, as you can see empirically is the case, indeed, we can see this today just looking at society in the last 30 years, qualitatively, human society is devolving. Devolving, qualitatively. Qualitatively meaning as far as the actual qualities of what it means to be human and the expressions of what it means to be human, i.e. culture, etc. Culture, religion, all the human institutions, etc. Now, all this being the case, it is understood that indeed the conditions that are here that human beings are experiencing in the Kali Yuga are quite different from what they were in previous ages. That being the case, what this verse is speaking about is precisely, it is a verse speaking to you and to me, to individuals who are living here, now, in this age, and what it is that we are to do to know God. All right, now all that being said, let's go on. It is certainly the case that in this Kali Yuga, wise men, and again we're going to stop. So again, this verse applies not just to anyone. You know, one thing about the Vedic scriptures, one thing about Sanatana Dharma is the radical lack and rejection of radical egalitarianism. Any individual who thinks that they know something about Vedic spirituality, about quote-unquote Hinduism, etc., and they feel that, or they will attempt to teach that one of the bases of this worldview is radical egalitarianism, is either someone who is a severe liar or someone who is ill-educated in this path. No, it's understood that people are different, and indeed some people are extremely highly qualified to know truth and some are not. And while it may sound unjust, it isn't, because it is all due to the choices of the individual. So this verse is speaking not just to anyone, but again, those individuals who are wise, those individuals who are intelligent, those individuals who have the philosophical acumen necessary to thus dive deeply into what it means to practice spirituality. So this is who this verse is addressed to. Now, let's go on. It is certainly the case that in this age of Kali, wise men worship, and now there is a little clause that's here before the verse really goes on. And let's look at this clause. How do they worship? Through sacrificial rituals predominantly consisting of reciting the names of the Lord and singing praises to him. So there is a little break that is here, that is actually here in the verse, and this, the way that I structured this in the English is precisely following the mood of the Sanskrit and how the Sanskrit is structured in the actual Sanskrit of the verse as well. So again, this is a little side clause that is here, but it's also crucial because this is talking about what is that process of worship. So now this is the sadhana portion of this verse. So how do these wise men worship? Precisely in this way. Through sacrificial rituals. Let's stop there. Yagya is the actual word, meaning yagya, meaning literally sacrificial ritual. Now, why is that term used? Why not bhajana, for example, some other word that could be used which connotes the idea of worship more? No, rather this word yagya is actually used, meaning precisely sacrificial ritual. Well, why? Why is this the case? As we know, there is a reason for every single word placement and every grammatical structure of every single word placed in every verse of the Vedic scriptures. Well, several things to be said. Several things, and this gets a little bit subtle. This has to deal with many things, including the history of Sanatana Dharma, various schools of thought, etc. But the idea basically is that in previous ages, the idea of yagya was especially important. This is why, for example, the idea of yagya practice, you find as a predominant theme in all of the oldest layers of Vedic scriptures, i.e. the four Samhitas themselves. So what you find is yagya. That is the idea of indeed doing these sacrificial rituals in which you have fire rituals and you make offerings to the gods and to God. Well, the reason why this verse is using this is to juxtapose even more that this is the prescription for the Kali Yuga, which equates to yagya, i.e. the predominant practice of previous yugas. I hope this makes sense. But again, it's fascinating how we can go that deeply into why even the word yagya is used here. And that is the reason why, is because again, in previous yugas, yagya was more predominant. That being the case, the speaker here in this verse is making it clear that basically in the same way that wise men did yagya in the past, the quote-unquote yagya for today, for the Kali Yuga, is this. And now we proceed. So it is predominantly consisting of, and now two things, reciting the names of the Lord, and let's stop there. Let's stop there. By reciting the names of the Lord, of course, what we're talking about is meditation, and specifically mantra meditation. That is, meditating very specifically on the names of God. So by reciting the names of God, this is speaking about yogic sadhana, such that we are indeed, one could say, chanting the holy names of the Lord, or reciting the names, or as I would like to say, meditating upon the names of God. So that's the first thing. Second thing is sankirtana. That is singing praises to him. Quite literally singing devotional songs, devotional praises in such a way that in rapt attention and in ecstatic bliss, we are quite literally singing the names of God and singing the praises of God in such a way that we are developing bhakti, we are developing devotion toward God within. So this is indeed considered to be the most important practice of this age, that is taking shelter of the names of God, and taking shelter of the names of God in every way, but both by meditating upon the names of God. So thus, as the ISDS teaches, and as I teach in accordance with my specific lineage, reciting the names of Narayana, Om Namo Narayanaya, and any of the other, again, authorized, legitimate, authentic mantras that are revealed in the Vedic scriptures, in which we are meditating upon the names of God. So again, this is the first way in which we worship God in this age. But again, the second way is kirtan, what in modern parlance and Hindiized is called kirtan. That is kirtana. That is singing the names of God, singing also the praises of God. This can be done both individually, but also collectively as well, in a more congregational sort of way. So this is indeed considered to be one of the easiest practices that we can perform in this day and age in order to worship God, and thus, hopefully in time, to come to actually know God. Because it is in worship and in meditation upon X object that we then come to know that object. This is simply how meditation works. This is how sadhana works. So this is the clause that is thrown in here in the middle. That is indeed the sadhana clause that explains what precisely is the way in which we worship God, thus coming to know Him more, coming to commune with Him, and have devotional relationship with God. But now, as we go on, the thought continues that was there in the very first sentence, in the very first clause. So what I'm going to do, just for the sake of continuity of thought, I'm going to read again from the beginning. I'm going to skip this clause that we just looked at, that is the sadhana clause, and then skip to where the thought continues, just so that we can keep track of this. So bear with me, read with me if you can. Again, this verse is in the description. It is certainly the case that in this age of Kali, wise men worship the Lord, who is of a dark blue color. Now let's stop there. Now you see how I skipped that intermediary clause that was there, just again for continuity of thought, so that we don't get confused and it makes sense to us. So this is now not just how, but who is worshipped, very specifically, by these wise men, Sumedaha, these wise men in the Kali Yuga. And who do they worship? They worship the Lord. They worship God, they worship that supreme being, but now several descriptives are given. Because as you've heard me say a million times, and the reason why I say it a million times is due to the crucial nature of this knowledge, that if we're speaking about something of importance, you want to have as much specificity as possible. If you're talking about something important, you don't want vagueness. To simply say, oh, what is the nature of God? Oh, God is great. Well, that's not untrue. Can you tell me more? No. God is great. All right. Well, again, that is true. That is not untrue. But I would like to know infinitely more than this, because this is my reason for being, is to know what is that absolute. That being the case, I want as many specifics as possible. So again, the Vedic scriptures, being the Vedic scriptures, and thus indeed focusing on tremendous specificity. Now the specifics are given. So the Lord, who is of a dark blue color. This is, the word here is Krishna. And Krishna, the word Krishna has several meanings, actually. Certainly it means the avatar, very specifically, the avatar known as Bhagavan Sri Krishna, who is an avatar of Srimad Narayana. But this is not the only meaning. Indeed, interestingly, it's not even the primary meaning. That's a secondary meaning, actually, of the word Krishna. Not the name, but the word Krishna. Krishna, very specifically, is a color. And very specifically, the traditional understanding of what the translation was of this word Krishna is dark blue, extremely dark blue. This is why when you see depictions of Vishnu Tattva, that is, of Krishna, of Vishnu, of Narayana, etc., the hue that you see, the color that you see of this Vishnu Tattva, of God, is indeed this very interesting color of dark blue. So this is indeed what is being said here, is that the Lord, who is of a dark blue color. So now, there are several reasons why this word is used, why God is described as dark blue in color. First of all, so that there's no mistaking who is being spoken about. This is Narayana, who is being spoken about. This is Vishnu, who is being spoken about. Not someone else, not some historical figure who was a great prophet or teacher in the past, not this person, that person, etc., etc. But again, this is speaking very specifically about Narayana and no one else. And the reason why we know this is, again, because this describes Narayana. And as we go on with the rest of this verse, we'll see also how, yes, with each of these attributes, with each of these descriptive qualities that are given of what is God, we understand that this is Narayana, because these are these are many of the attributes of Narayana. So let's go on. So who is being worshipped? The Lord, who is of a dark blue color, but now interesting, though he is bright in luster, in luster. Akrishnam. Krishnavaranam Tvisha Krishnam. So he is Krishnam, he is dark blue in color, but he is also Akrishnam. He is also bright in luster. So thus you have the color, which is dark blue, but now you have its opposite, which along with the previous word, Tvisha Krishnam, is understood to mean that bright luster that emanates from God. Such is the nature of God that God has, as I have said a million times, he has his locus of being. That is, he has his actual being. That is God himself. But then in addition to this, he also has a luster. He also has light that very naturally emanates from his being itself. So that's what's being discussed here. That's what's being described. That is, he is bright in luster. That is, he is the source of light. He is the source of light. That all light, interestingly, in all of existence, ultimately has its originating point in Sriman Narayana. Nowhere else. Not the sun, not the moon, not a light bulb, not a candle, not a giwick, deepa. No. These are all effects of which Narayana is the cause. Narayana is the source of all light in existence, compared to whom every other light pales in insignificance and seems almost not like light compared to that brightness that comes from God himself and from that locus, that being of God himself. So this being the case, this is a very nice juxtaposition that is being made here. And you can see this again in the Sanskrit itself. Krishna, Akrishna. It's a juxtaposition. It's an opposite and nothing but an opposite. When you add, just like in English, interestingly, when you add the prefix a to a word, it makes it its opposite. Just like theist, you add a to the beginning, atheist. Theist, atheist, opposites. And it's exactly the same in Sanskrit, interestingly. You add that a to the beginning of a word, it becomes its opposite. So rather than dark blue, Krishnam, Akrishnam is what is spoken of here. That is brightness. So this is how God is being described. That he is the Lord who is of a dark blue color, though he is bright in luster, thus understanding that this is indeed God. And now we go on to more clauses. Who is accompanied by his associates. Oh, there is never a time when God is alone, but God is always accompanied by his very close devotees, by his very close associates, those individuals who are with him eternally. So they include such beings, for example, as just one example, as Anantashesha or Garuda, as two examples. These are beings who are eternal companions of God. So thus, who is accompanied by his associates. This is what is being spoken of here. And indeed, this is understood to be the nature of Narayana also. So again, with each one of these clauses, it is unmistakable that it is Narayana who is being spoken of here. Because in the Vedic scriptures, this is precisely how Narayana is described. He is of dark blue color, but he is so bright as to be blinding, so bright as to be inconceivable. And he is accompanied by his associates. That is, he has these beings who are his eternal associates, who are always with him. All right, let's go on now. Flawless in all of his limbs. In other words, he's beautiful. He's beautiful. The word that is used is anga, anga meaning limbs. So he is flawless in all of his limbs. And how many limbs does he have? Really an infinite number, because he's God. But generally speaking, and this is the reason why this is very specifically brought to the fore in this verse, why he is flawless in all of his limbs. Very specifically, again, this is speaking of Narayana, who has 6 limbs. He has 2 legs and 4 arms, thus making him unique in appearance. So again, this is why of all the various qualities that can be discussed about God, and there are an infinite number, this is one of the ones that is brought up in this verse, so that again, you are making no mistake. Why are God's limbs being spoken of? Because it's pointing to that being who has a multitude of limbs, very specifically, thus making him unique. So this is speaking again of Narayana or Vishnu, who has 4 arms, 2 legs, and he is flawless in these limbs. By extension, by implication, we can understand that it's not merely his limbs. It's not that he has very beautiful, perfect looking limbs, but oh, the rest of him isn't so great. No, this is God who we're speaking of. So by extension, it could be understood that we're speaking about every aspect of God, about the ultimate Svarupa, the ultimate spiritual form of God. And God is beautiful, flawless, perfect. That is what is being said here, that he is flawless in all of his limbs. He is perfect and thus beautiful in his appearance, in other words. So this is another way in which we can know that what is being spoken of, who is being spoken of, very specifically is Narayana, Sriman Narayana. And why? Because all throughout the Vedic scriptures, it doesn't matter which scripture you look at, this is how Narayana is depicted, as being the source of all beauty. The most beautiful being, aesthetically pleasing being in all of reality. And there is only one being who is described in this way, and that is Narayana. So again, this is who is being spoken of here. And now let's go on, and this makes it even clearer. Equipped with his weapons. Equipped with his weapons. So this makes it even more clear. Astra. Astra is the word that is used in the Sanskrit, and that means weapons. He is equipped with weapons. And again, there are many avatars, even of Narayana, and not all of them have weapons, actually, interestingly. Not all of them do have weapons. Many of them do. But very specifically, the way that you know that this is not just one of the avatars who's being spoken of, but specifically Narayana, is because of this mention of weapons. Narayana carries several things, including weapons. And truthfully, it depends, of course, as far as what kind of weapons. It depends on which aspect of Narayana you're looking at, because there are many different aspects. Indeed, I mentioned that he has an infinite number of arms. Usually we see him with 4, but he could have an infinite number of arms, where he has a multiplicity of weapons. But the 2 weapons that he is especially known for when he is in his 4-armed form is very specifically the mace. That is an actual mace, just like they had in medieval times and ancient times, a club sort of weapon. But he also has the chakra. He has the Sudarshana chakra. He has that chakra that he wields on his finger. That is a chakra. That is a spinning wheel. That is the most powerful weapon in all of existence, whether the material or the spiritual world. So indeed, Vishnu, Narayana, is equipped with weapons. Not all of the avatars are, not all of the other aspects of Narayana are, all the other aspects of God, but Narayana very specifically is equipped with weapons. And that's, again, yet again, how we know that it is specifically Narayana who is being spoken of in this verse. And then finally, and he is served by his attendants. He is served by his attendants. And it doesn't say this in this verse, but we know from other verses. How many attendants? An infinite number of attendants, of servants, of individuals who are there to attend to all of his needs. This is not just anyone we're speaking of. This is not just some great king. This is not just some great emperor. This is not even just some great Chakravartin, some great individual who is the personification of both a rishi and a kshatriya, a warrior. No, this is someone who is the source of all reality. Thus, he has an infinite number of individuals who are attendants, and who are attendants extremely willingly so. Indeed, most of these attendants, many of these attendants, are individuals who practiced yoga, practice austerities, practice meditation, practice and cultivated bhakti or devotion in their spiritual lives in such a way that upon achieving liberation, their greatest desire would be fulfilled, and that desire was indeed to be a humble servant and attendant to Sriman Narayana. So we are talking about God being surrounded by an infinite number of such pure beings. beings who we would call liberated sages, beings who are the Jesuses of this world, the Rishis of this world, the liberated, enlightened yogis of this world, and knowing Him, finally knowing God in liberation, it is their aspiration to be His servant. So thus, the greatest liberated being is the servant of God. And this is what we all should aspire for. This is what we all should aspire for. Indeed, this is what I aspire for every second of the day, is simply to serve God in any small way or big way that I can. And this is what we should all aspire to be, is indeed attendants to God, servants of God, in such a way that we fulfill what is our raison d'être. We fulfill what is our spiritual reason for being. The reason why we exist, spiritually speaking, is indeed ultimately to serve God with unlimited pure devotion. This is why we are alive. This is why we have existence. So thus, it is explained here that that ultimate God, that Supreme Lord, who wise men worship, that Supreme Lord is served by His attendants. So all this being said, this beautiful, beautiful verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 5, Verse 32, explains indeed who we are to worship in this age of the Kali Yuga, who it is that we are to worship. And again, not vaguely, not just, oh, God is great, whatever God is, that impersonal energy being in the sky, who we will never truly fully know. No, very specific. This is God. These are some of the attributes, the qualifying attributes of God, the Vishishta, the qualifying attributes of God. So this is the first thing that's discussed. The second thing is how. How do we worship that Supreme Being? And how we worship that Supreme Being is by, in meditation, devotional meditation, reciting the names of God with great devotion and singing the names and the praises of God with great devotion, either individually or with groups of other devotees. This is how we worship and thus come to know God in this day and age, 2022. Very good. So all that being said, I thank you very much for listening to my lecture, listening to my discourse. And with that, let me now signal to everyone, now is the time. If you wish to ask some questions, please feel free. And it would be my pleasure to try my best to answer your questions. As I always have to warn people, because we end at the top of the hour, we have about 21 minutes. I will not be able to get to everyone's questions, unfortunately. That is always the case. Sometimes I can't even get to half of them. But I will certainly do my very best to answer as many questions as I can. And now the questions are pouring in. Give me a moment, please, as I look at these. Good. Here are two good questions from Mr. Oldenswolf. And they are, blessings upon you, Sri Acharya-ji. Thank you. Should Vaishnavas be concerned with the hellish planets? That's number one. Number two, does a guru take some of his disciples' karma upon himself? Very good. Yes, two very different questions, but very good, very important questions, actually, and I will definitely answer this. First, you ask, should Vaishnavas be concerned with the hellish planets? Yes and no. No, in that it's not something that we should be worried about. Certainly being Vaishnavas, and with everything that entails, i.e. being individuals who are sattvic, we are on a path of purity, of goodness, of integrity, etc., of progressive spiritual growth and advancement. It's not that for ourselves personally we should worry about, let's say, being born in the hellish planets as a result of some sort of bad karma, etc. No, interestingly, regardless of what our karma may be and that may have been in the past, the truth of the matter is once you come to this very, very distinct place of now truly worshiping God and wanting to devote your life to God, at that point, hell is no longer a concern. Even bad karma that ordinarily may have even sent you to hell is no longer a concern. But rather, on the contrary, when you begin the path of being indeed a Vaishnava, all of this previous karma begins to burn off very quickly. Oh, some is still there. It's not instant. It's not very little is instant in spiritual progress, but it does indeed begin to burn off in a very quick sort of way. So it's not something that we should be concerned about for ourselves. On the other hand, there are indeed individuals who are in the hellish realms, and we should certainly have compassion upon them. There are individuals who are in these lower realms, and when we say hellish realms, it's not just hellish in, let's say, the Christian concept of these being merely places of punishment. Rather, there are these lower realms, these lower, what are called lokas, these planetary realms that are considered to be qualitatively very, very, very bad, where many of the individuals are just residents there. They were born there due to, indeed, their previous karma. They'll be there for some time. Once their karma is burnt away, well, then eventually they become a little bit more elevated, maybe being on this middle earth again, on this middle plane yet again, etc. But in the meantime, these hellish realms are indeed places that are terrible, where the quality of life is horrible, and we should indeed have compassion for such beings. So, if it ever happened to be the circumstance that an individual were to become advanced enough a yogi, that they would feel a specific mission to spend at least a little bit of time in these hellish realms, trying to elevate people in one way or another, trying to help people, trying to show some love toward the people of these areas, well, then certainly, given that opportunity, you should take that opportunity. But again, it's not something that should be worried about. Now, the second question is, does a guru take some of his disciples' karma upon himself? Yes, indeed. That is indeed the case. That's understood in accordance with the Vedic scriptures. Also, many previous acharyas have said this. The most recent has been Prabhupada himself said this many, many times to his disciples, that very specifically it is upon giving initiation to a disciple that at that point the guru shares in some of the karma of that disciple. So this is why it's been said in the past that a guru has to be very careful to not take on too many disciples for this reason. Because again, taking on such a burden upon himself is quite dangerous. It's something that can be very painful for the guru. But indeed, it is the case that in order to help that disciple to advance more rapidly spiritually, the guru will, of his own free will and of his own accord, take upon himself some of the suffering that would ordinarily have happened to that disciple. So yes, that is indeed the case. So I hope that answers those questions. Here's a very important, very contemporary question. Erisir the First asks, Namaste, I'm from the increasingly adharmic country of Australia. Aside from normal daily practice, what spiritual actions do you recommend to avoid anti-dharmic persecution from authorities? Thank you. Yes, let me comment on this, actually. Let me comment on this a little bit. I am very, 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 very aware of what is happening in Australia, and for that matter, Austria, and for that matter, the UK, and for that matter, Canada, and quite a few nations throughout the world. And as I always say, I'm not going to be discussing politics in any way whatsoever. And the truth of the matter is it is not necessary to do so. This is something that transcends politics. Indeed, we've seen that there are many adharmic, that is anti-dharmic practices that have been implemented by many governments throughout the world. And in Australia specifically, depending on where you are, if you're in Melbourne, for example, it's especially bad. And that being the case, indeed, what can you do to avoid such anti-dharmic persecution from authorities? Several things. You mentioned it. First of all, daily spiritual practice, but more, as I was saying a lot, especially early last year and the year before that, actually, take full advantage of the fact that indeed your ability to, your mobility, let's say, your mobility has been hampered tremendously by many of the things happening there. Take full advantage of that fact. You may be stuck in your home, for example. Again, I don't know where in Australia you are, so it varies a little bit. But you may be stuck in your home. You may have a very difficult time even taking a walk somewhere, taking a walk in a park or on a beach or something like this. It may be a terrible situation. Take full advantage of this, certainly for spiritual practice, but more than this, to also develop the mindset of a yogi. The mindset of a yogi is many things, but let me just mention a few things that are very practical that I hope will help you. The mindset of the yogi, of the spiritual practitioner, is one of detachment, one in which, regardless of the circumstances that you find yourself in, either good or bad, you do your practice nonetheless. You keep your eyes, you keep your awareness upon God and upon truth nonetheless. So a type of detachment is something that is of great importance. Also, the yogi practices a mindset of being someone who is very much in isolation, but in a positive way. That is, they seek the solace of quietude. They seek an atmosphere in which indeed there are very few interruptions in their life, so that they can do all the important things that they need to do. That is, read books, read scriptures, do meditation, do pranayama, do yoga, etc., etc. Indeed, all the practices that are there. You know, the yogi is someone who indeed is someone who tends toward isolation. They are someone who tends to want the company of God above all things. So that being the case, use this as an opportunity to practice a little bit of quietude, And yes, you may not have a lot of company right now. Certainly you should have some. But the fact that you may not have quite as much company, quite as many conveniences, etc., etc., use this as an opportunity to practice simplicity, to practice modesty, etc., in such a way that by practicing simplicity, indeed, you are ridding yourself of many of the distractions that come from ordinary life and that, again, distract us from practicing spirituality, etc. So this is what I'm saying. Practice the mindset of a yogi more than anything, and use this as a good opportunity to do this. Use this also as an opportunity, and let me just say this and end with this. Use this as an opportunity to, whenever you can, to help others to know truth and to fight for truth and for justice wherever you find yourself, in whatever peaceful way that you can. So I hope that is somewhat helpful. And let me just say, let me say one more thing that actually needs to be said. That is very, very, very important. This situation will not go on forever. It will end. Exactly when? Oh, I can't give you a date, but I can guarantee it's not going to go on forever. Indeed, it's not going to go on for much longer. So please have hope and never lose hope. Very good. Very good. Varsaga, the eternal question. Why is Vishnu blue? Very good. Yes, why is Vishnu blue? To answer this is to answer any similar sort of question. Why is an individual white? Why is an individual black? Why is an individual, and pick a color. As far as why God is blue, that is the color that he chooses to be, and not just blue, but shyama. It's dark blue. It is the blue that is the color of rain-filled clouds. It's a beautiful blue, actually. And why is it the case? Several reasons, actually. And indeed, in the past, I've answered this very, very in depth, which I'm not going to today just because we have about 9 minutes. But let me just say one of the most important reasons is indeed, as I was saying in the verse itself, to offset the the appearance of God. In other words, everyone else are different colors. You haven't encountered very many dark blue individuals in your life. This is something that distinguishes God. So indeed, it is his choosing to be that color. It is unique, as is God. Everything about God is unique, indeed, including even his color. He is dark blue. Very good. I hope that answers the question. Very good. All right, here is a very interesting question. Namaste. What is your opinion on Baltic folk faith revivals such as Romuva or Dievturiba? Apparently, the Balt languages are similar to Sanskrit too. Very good. Excellent question. Let me say that I am extremely favorable and very happy and very supportive of all of these attempts in the Baltic nations to revive the pre-Christian religions that were there. And I am indeed familiar with several of the people involved, the movements involved, what's happening there, etc. And it's been going on for some time, but especially since the end of communism there. Communism was the greatest curse ever foisted upon humanity in the totality of the Kali Yuga. And the Baltic people know that more than almost anyone. And since the death of communism there, at least, it's kind of become reborn in America and the West, unfortunately. But with the death of communism in the Baltic region especially, indeed, many of these pre-Christian religions are being revived there, and in a very big way. Indeed, many of these religions are extremely similar. In fact, I'd say more so than many of the other pre-Christian European religions. The religions of the Baltic area are extremely similar to the Vedic religion, even in much of the language. And this is, again, what makes the religions of the Baltic area a little bit different from the ancient religions of the rest of Europe, is that it's even in the language that you see many, many, many similarities. So, for example, I've written in my books how the Lithuanian word for the natural way is dharna. So you have dharma in Sanskrit, dharna in Lithuanian, and on and on. And again, you being Baltic, I don't know if you're from Lithuania or Latvia or where you're from exactly, but I'm sure you are also aware of this, that many of the words are either exactly the same in many cases, or they're quite similar. They're extremely similar to the Sanskrit. So indeed, to answer your question, as far as the pre-Christian European religions of the Baltic area, we support them entirely. If you are a part of this movement, I encourage you to do everything in your power to revive, to restore these pre-Christian European Vedic religions to your people in every way that you can. And we are more than willing to help you in every and any way. So, thank you for that question. Very good. Here's a nice question from Jesse Mosa. And Jesse, very nice to see you. Namaste. And the question is, Namaste, Sri Acharya-ji. Thank you for sharing this translation. My pleasure. Is singing our mantra meditation appropriate for beginners, or is it better to stay with Japa for a while? Good question. Both are good, and they can both be done simultaneously, actually. It's not a matter of, as a beginner, which one a beginner should do, one versus the other. They're both good, and they both can be done by beginners and advanced practitioners, both, actually. So thus, you will see if you go to any authentic Vedic temple that indeed they do mantra meditation as meditation, that is sitting with the eyes closed and using japa mala, reciting the names of God, reciting mantra, meditating on those mantras. But you will also see that they will also do kirtan as well. That is singing the praises and the names of God. Indeed, even here at our temple, actually, we do both. We do both. When we have congregational meetings here at our temple, we will sometimes do mantra meditation, where indeed I will I will myself sit in this seat that is behind me, and we'll have our congregation here of however many people, and I will meditate out loud, reciting the mantra, Om Namo Narayanaya, Om Namo Narayanaya. And I will be meditating like that, and everyone else also will be sitting with their eyes closed, also meditating out loud in that way. It creates a very nice hum when everyone is just meditating and reciting of their own accord. But then we'll do kirtan also. So we have all the instruments here. We have at least a dozen karatalas. We have harmonium. We have dhol, which is kind of like a mridangam. We have other instruments. And we will indeed do bhajan, sometimes for half an hour, sometimes an hour. So indeed, it's nice to do both. And in fact, to even go back and forth as you are inspired to do so. So I hope that answers the question. This is an interesting question from Alexander Phillips, and it is, are those who fail to achieve liberation forced to be reincarnated in the same yuga, in our case the Kali Yuga, or can they be reborn later in a different yuga? Good question. And indeed, they can be born in different yugas. They don't have to be reborn in the same yuga. For that matter, they don't even have to be born on the same planet. For that matter, they don't even have to be born in the same universe. And this is also something that is important for people to understand, that indeed we believe in multiple universes. There are many, many different universes in existence, not just this one. And they all came into being at different times, and they will all go out of being at different times. That being the case, while it may be Kali Yuga on this planet right now, in a different universe, on a comparable planet, it will be Satya Yuga right at this exact same moment, or it will be Treta Yuga, or Dvapara Yuga, etc. Or it will be an in-between period, in between any of these yugas. So that being the case, a person can, let's say, pass away and be reborn even in a different universe where indeed it is a different yuga, and that in accordance with their karma. So let's say a person, just to give a theoretical, a person can be alive in the middle of the Dvapara Yuga, which was the previous yuga, and they were not a very good person, and as a result they have bad karma. So then as a result of that, when they die, even though it's Dvapara Yuga for them, they can be born in a different universe, and part of their punishment will be to be born in the Kali Yuga of that universe, of that specific planet, on that specific universe. So indeed, yes, it is the case that a person does not have to be reincarnated in the exact same yuga, but there is a lot of leeway in accordance with all of the myriad intricacies of that individual's unique karma. So I hope that answers the question. With that, we have 1 minute, so let me see if maybe there's a question that I can answer in 1 minute. And again, I'm skipping a bunch of questions just so that I can find one that I know I can answer pretty quickly. So please give me a moment. I have a question here I'm very tempted to answer, but I know it would take too long. So hopefully I'll see this question again next week and I'll have an opportunity to answer it. Very good. Here is a good question that I can answer relatively quickly, actually, and it's an important one. Do the people in power know about the coming golden age, and are they trying to stop it? Or are they unaware? Very good. The individuals who are in power in the very highest echelons of that power group, one could say, oh yes, they are aware. These are not stupid people. They are aware. They are aware that a golden age is coming. And of course, in the silliness of who they are, in the foolishness of their very being, of course they're going to try to stop it, and they have been trying to stop it. And whether they'll be successful, well, you know the answer to that. They can never be successful. But they'll try, and they are trying. But a golden age will descend upon them with such veracity that they'll simply fade into insignificance and into nothingness in its wake. Very good. So with that, I'm going to end here because it is a few minutes past the top of the hour. I apologize very much for those individuals for whom I could not get to your questions. If you're new here, you see that I try my best, but again, we do limit this broadcast to an hour, and I try my best to answer as many questions as I can. But if I didn't get to your question, please try again next week when we indeed get together again. And I thank you again very much, very, very much for being here. And again, just to remind you, please subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so. Please go to dharmacentral.com and look at our books that are available. Our beautiful mantra album that is available is simply called Mantra Meditations. And please sign up for our email list. If you go there, you'll see that there's a little section where you can sign up and you will receive announcements from the International Sanatana Dharma Society, which is the name of our movement, a global movement in multiple dozens of nations now throughout the world that is working very hard to restore Dharma on every single level of the human experience. Indeed, just as an aside, the International Sanatana Dharma Society is a religious movement. But our goal is indeed not limited only to what in the normative sense is termed religion. But rather, our goal is indeed to restore Dharma to every single aspect of the human experience. And that means everything that you can think of, every field that you can think of. And indeed, this is what we are doing, and quite successfully so. So please help us if you can by giving a donation, a one-time donation if you can. And again, dharmacentral.com, you can see on there where to do so. Or by becoming a member. If you can become a tithing member and give any amount that you wish every month, that would be something that would be tremendously helpful toward our mission of restoring Dharma in this world. So with that, I again thank you for being here. Please join us again next week if you can, next Monday at 7 p.m. Central Time, and whatever time it is for you. And with that, namaste. Jaya Shriman Narayana. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Dharma Rashtra Jayate. Om Hri Om. And with that, everyone, until we meet again next week, I ask you all to please take very good care of yourselves in every way.